Hey, Steve Saretsky here. Actually wanted to put together a video. I know this isn't the usual Friday programming, but basically something blowing up on Twitter. Basically wanted to add a couple thoughts to that long-winded debate. Again, if you're not following me, it's at Steve Saretsky on Twitter. So basically, Horgan NDP came out recently. He's quoted as saying, I'm going to read this quickly. Housing is a critical component in many people's equity and their retirement prospects, and we want to make sure that we don't adversely affect the marketplace. What we want to make sure is we get speculation out. So this ultimately boils down to, as I've said before, it's politics. You can't. There's a fallacy out there that you can, as a government, can just control or manipulate house prices. As much as they can control policies, they cannot just simply set a house price to drop. Say, we want housing to be more affordable. What is more affordable? Do they have a set? What is that set price? They say we want prices to come down 20%, and we're just gonna basically maneuver. We're gonna start pulling all these levers, and then we're gonna hit 20%, and then all of a sudden, that's our mandate. It's 20%. It's just simply not the cause. And to think that there's basically going on that people are saying, well, if we take 20%, if we have a 20% drop in house price, it basically brings us back to 2016. That means there'd only be a very small amount of people affected. Just could not be further from the truth. And again, this is irrelevant to if you want prices to rise, stay the same, or go down. The fact of the matter is, don't shoot the messenger. There's realities of housing booms and housing busts, and the fact of the matter is, when you have a 70% of BC and really Canada is one of the highest homeownership rates in the world. You cannot simply remove 20% of people's equity and not have a major implications, not only from, even regardless of when you bought, you have to think about, okay, you can be free and clear, right? You can be free and clear, but just from a net worth perspective, is you've literally just taken 20% of someone's net worth, that they're maybe drawing equity out, maybe they're planning for retirement. You've literally just cut their net worth by 20%. So the fact of the matter is that number one is you've just cut their net worth. Now, you can say maybe that they're not entitled to that net worth, etc. But the fact of the matter is if they've planned on it, they've banked on it, maybe they're not fiscally responsible. That's up for debate. But the fact of the matter is you've just taken down someone's net worth. So what are they going to do? Are they going to be, if someone loses 20% of their net worth, or an equity of this massive asset that is tied to so many people's lives, are they going to go out and spend in the economy? Are they going to go to restaurants? Are they going to go and do that home renovation? Are they going to go and buy that new car? Because we know auto loan sales right now are at record levels in Canada. Record levels, and that is obviously correlated. Housing booms are the single largest wealth effect. So you'll see a lot of governments that push for this. This is after the 2000 stock market. Alan Greenspan, head of the federal chair, basically came out and said we need to create basically a wealth effect, and they targeted real estate. You can see, George W. Bush, they implemented all these home ownership loan programs for the United States. They made it very much easier to get into the housing market, and that's basically what spurred the massive growth. The credit exploded, and of course we all know the end result of that. But everybody starts to feel wealthier, and so they spend, so the economy was booming, and then all of a sudden, of course, we know what happened. So the fact of the matter is, with governments, everybody's saying, well, the NDP lied to us. They said they're going to do this and this and that, and they're going to tackle the housing. But the reality of it is you cannot, and again, this is just me, I'm the messenger, I'm telling you what is happening. Again, whether you agree with it or not, it is a sad reality, is you can't have house prices come down 20% while simultaneously growing jobs and having a stronger economic growth and having a more viable province or economy. You cannot bring house prices down even 5-10% without having serious repercussions. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean house prices should come down. I think that from a long-term sustainability standpoint, you need to have a correction. Real estate is cyclical. It goes up and it goes down. It goes up and it goes down. And obviously, it's gone up more than it goes down. But you need to have downs to basically get rid of bad debts. And of course, in Canada, we've had obscene credit growth over the last 10, 15 years, particularly after the financial crisis, basically borrowing your way out of it. You can see right now is home equity lines of credit make up 14% of Canadian GDP. As part of the bank's lending book, residential real estate makes up almost 40% of the big banks' books of their lending books is residential real estate. So there's a lot of heavy chips into real estate. So again, if you bring down real estate prices in, let's just say in Vancouver by say 20%, that was sort of the debate. You essentially have, you cannot just bring them down and then it's happy days. So basically, it just feeds on itself. It's on momentum. So you look at the repercussions of that. Again, what happens when people lose 20% of their net wealth? You lose jobs. People get laid off. They get forced into sales. So again, maybe they are free and clear. Maybe they have 50% equity in their homes. But if somebody gets laid off and they start missing payments because the economy sucks, because you've had this massive correction, that all feeds into itself. And so I'm going to get into the credit stuff, but basically you have to look again at home equity line of credit growth in Canada. So credit growth is ultimately what drives demand. So you can say, wow, we have all this crazy demand. Yes, we have a lot of offshore foreign money coming in the last couple of years, but you have credit growth with low interest rates, banks' desire to lend to fund people. You can see a lot of people drawing equity out of their homes, buying second, third investment properties. Credit growth ultimately drives demand. So if you have, the more credit you have in the system, basically the more demand you have, the more people have the ability to actually go out and purchase. So, if they're not lending money out, or if they're lending at 10%, how many people are actually going to be able to afford a home? So the fact of the matter is, when you have credit growth, the acceleration in credit growth is ultimately a driver of demand. So where am I going with this? Is essentially, again, if you have a drop in house price by 20%, what do you think the banks are going to do? How do you think the banks are going to react? They're going to go into shock mode. They have all this money banking on residential real estate, which all of a sudden has lost 20% of their net worth, their equity. They're going to start recalling loans. They're going to start recalling loans, whether it's a business loan, a home equity line of credit. These are all on-demand loans. They can recall those basically at any time. Now, will they? I don't know. But that's what they're going to do. They're not all of a sudden going to keep loaning out people. Oh, you're a first-time buyer. Come on in. Here's a mortgage. No, what they're going to do is they're going to tighten up. And when you have home equity line of credit, which makes up 14% of GDP, that charade basically stops. It no longer exists. And so just to put it into context, home equity lines of credit growth peaked in the U.S. housing crisis at 4.5% of GDP. So the fact that in Canada is at 14%, basically the music ultimately stops. As soon as house prices stop rising, banks are not going to be as friendly about giving you a home equity line of credit. And as soon as they start coming down, now they're going to say, oh gosh, maybe we should better recall some of those. Do you think they're actually going to let you take out a home equity line of credit now to do to purchase another property? And so that slowly chips away at demand. You can look at the bigger scale developers. Are banks or lenders going to be very content? Are they going to be giving out massive loans to these developers, hundreds of billions of dollars to build these projects? It's not going to happen. And we saw this in 2008, where we basically had in Vancouver, we only had about a 15% drop in prices, and you had people walking away from pre-sales. You had massive developers basically offloading inventory, just slashing prices as if it was like some sort of Boxing Day deal. And again, so this is basically the credit wheel. What I'm essentially trying to sum up is, if you have a price drop, the credit cycle essentially stops, and it reverses and it cleanses out all the debt, and they're not going to lend, and it just feeds on itself. And so again, when you have all these, everything is banking on real estate, when you have 70% of the population here is home ownership, and you're starting to take away their equity. Now they can't get that home equity line of credit. We talked about wage growth, how wage growth is so separated from house prices, but the fact of the matter is it doesn't really matter because people are just basically using their home as an ATM. You see HELOC credit growth. They can just keep drawing out. As long as house prices keep going up, you can just keep drawing more and more money out of your house. You can just keep, you can refinance, etc. But that all stops as house prices come down. So yes, ultimately the NDP government, whether you like it or not, they played a game of politics. They promised the world to get in. And they understand the implications of it, not just from a provincial level or from a city level in Vancouver, but they understand the micro, which is that the entire Canadian economy is riding on real estate. If you look at not the GDP numbers from the last quarter, but the quarter previous to that, if you literally took out real estate's growth to that GDP growth, we're actually in a recession. So again, what happens when you have a pullback in that? So not only house prices, so you can talk about realtor commissions, mortgage brokers, lawyers. Well, now what? How are you going to buy that car? What's going to happen to car sales? Are people going to go out and buy furniture? Probably not. Are they going to start doing home renovation? Probably not. Because why? Part of it is because, oh gosh, they have to tighten up when things get... When money gets scarce, people tighten up and they get fearful, and it's the same thing with the banks, right? When they're so exposed to real estate, what are they going to do? They're going to tighten back up, and they're going to start pulling money back in. They're not going to be so friendly to give you that big mortgage that you want today. So that's basically the fine line that government is playing right now. And again, you can agree with it, you can disagree with it, you can say, well, I elected them, I'm not gonna re-elect them. Then this is gonna be a quick in and out for them. But the fact of the matter is, it's gonna be an even quicker in and out if you bring equity values down 20%. If you are the person notified as, hey, you implemented this policy, house prices came down 20%. You become that guy. You are, and even though you might be doing something in the short term that ultimately is better in the long term, like you need to have, again, as real estate is cyclical. You need to have those purges. You need to get rid of bad debts. Even though you're maybe being responsible and deflating that bubble before it gets larger and more out of hand and ultimately does more harm, which is, governments have basically said, what, and central banks, we don't want a recession, we need to keep this thing going, and they've basically been juicing the markets since 2008. That's why we just went boom and right back up. But you will not get reelected if prices come down. And what happens when real estate goes down, it is the single, it's different than the stock market. When real estate prices come down, everybody gets affected. Everybody. I don't care if you rent or you live in a car or you tent in the woods. Everybody gets affected because unemployment rate goes up. It's naturally deflationary. It's a deflationary force in the economy. It brings prices down because what are you going to do? Are you going to now sell your couch for $2,000, or because the demand drops off, maybe you slash it to $1,500? It's naturally deflationary. So housing busts are literally the single worst thing for an economy. Again, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be one or there won't be one. I don't know. I'm not going to here to predict that, but I'm telling you, this is the precarious situation that the government finds itself. Not only the NDP government, but the Canadian government is. You have so much riding on this. It's been the single largest growth. Household debt is the highest in the G7. And again, what happens to all this debt when prices come down? It ripples right through everything. So that's basically where we're at. That's the words from the NDP government. They've basically come out and said, I think what's going to happen is they're going to target they're basically targeting this whole River Rock, money laundering, casino laundering, etc. They're going to get a lot of that junk money out of here, a lot of the illegal activities. Maybe that causes some ripple effect on the housing market. Like, I don't know, but that's not one that's like, hey, we implemented a 30% foreign buyers tax, or we said no more foreign buyers can buy real estate or whatever. Like, now that one is much more obvious to the public. You can say, hey, what the hell, because of you crashed the housing market, I don't have a job anymore. That won't get you reelected. So they're basically gonna, from what I understand, they're gonna close the fixed term tenancy loophole. So they're gonna make it more favorable for renters. They're gonna build a lot more affordable housing. They're basically just trying to help the renting class while almost keeping the housing market where it's at. And they're basically gonna let the market dictate what's going to happen. So maybe that's the central bank raising interest rates that starts to bring prices down. Maybe it's a US recession, or maybe whatever it is, and house prices just keep going up. Like, I don't know. I'm not going to speculate where that market goes, but they're not going to be the ones that are responsible for poking that and destroying. Basically, you can't bring prices down to a certain level and it's all hunky-dory and everybody just continues on with their life. That all of a sudden, hey, great, house prices are down 25%, everyone can go out and buy a house. We have already one of the highest home ownership rates, again, in the world at 70%, 70. I mean, how many people should be owning homes is another question. Should 80, 90, should everybody be owning a home? I think there's a lot of cases where people should be renting. I know that there's a lot of wealthy millionaires, entrepreneurs that rent. So you know what I mean? Like, it's just trying to get that through people's head. I know that's like, people say, screw this guy. But again, it's don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you from a political standpoint. You have to think about what did they promise you? They promised that we're gonna act on housing. We're gonna make it more affordable. We're gonna get rid of all this dirty money. Everybody's gonna own a home, and then we're gonna have this great job growth. We're gonna cut bridge tolls. We're gonna give teachers more money. Like, where is this money coming from? They're just gonna come out like this endless money tree that they can just manipulate the economy. They can just bring house prices down so everybody can buy while also stimulating the economy. And guys, it's politics. They promise things. This is how it works. From a political standpoint, do you want to be known as the guy that, I don't know, that's a tough position to be in. I know that it's a very polarizing topic, and again, I do think that real estate, again, is cyclical. You need to have ups and you need to have downs. You need to have recessions to rinse out that bad debt. So I think that at some point it comes naturally, but nobody wants to be the person to pull that trigger. And I think that maybe that's Christy Clark or Pelosi or Trudeau. Like, everybody's just kick it down the line and let the next guy deal with it. That's basically how politics work. Anyways, I rambled on. I'd love to hear your thoughts below. It was the same sort of thing, right? It's just basically ultimately comes down to just starting to educate people about, like, hey, this is what's happening. It's the same sort of people that say, it's the same sort of thing that people say that we shouldn't be recruiting, we should basically ban immigration. I think a lot of people are saying that, and I really understand the outrage, sort of looking for that, who to point the finger at, driving prices up, etc. But you have to understand why is Justin Trudeau, right or wrong, basically doubled down on immigration. If you look at a demographic standpoint, Canada's population demographics is a disaster, and it's the same in the US. They're basically going Japanese. If you look at Japan's economy, is where everybody's aging. You have in Canada the demographic of people over 65 years old is 18%. it could be a little bit higher. I think that's the end of 2014 numbers, so it's likely a little bit higher, is 18%. In Japan, I think it's about 23%. But Canada's demographics are aging. People are having less children, and so they have to continue to basically recruit more and more population. They have to pull in immigrants to keep their population growing, to basically avoid a deflationary scenario. And if you want to look at disaster economies, look at Japan. They have a massive deflation problem for the last 20 years. And so that's what they're basically trying to avoid. And so there's always reasons for what they do. And again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I think that governments have severely dropped the ball on the housing file over the last 10 years. And but that's the reality that we live in. So anyways, hope that helped.